Hello, everyone. Hello, people from the channel, and our channel, the Eranos Eating channel. We are very happy today because we are with Charles Eisenstein. He's going to be our first guest in this new vision of our channel, which is a wider vision. Some of you maybe know that we have a project called the Body Spirit, and that project is wider than the Eranos team. That project is about thinking or building the future we want to live, and also for the next generations. So welcome, Charles, to this channel. It is like a dream comes true. I knew about you through Roland Lee like 7 years ago or so. My Sufi master, who now is retired. It was beautiful to feel your sensibility about how caring little things in the life, in the day-by-day life, cooperation and that kind of things that normally we think they are little, are really very great. And they have the potential of building a wonderful future. And I would like to start, if you let me, asking you about that, about maybe also about rooted spirituality, no? That reflects in all of those things. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, you know what you're saying, on some level, actually, everybody knows it already because we can feel it. You know, when you look back over your life, and you remember what were the important moments. They were usually something very intimate. They were maybe, like, for me, one of the important moments was the last time I was with my mother, and we communicated something that was important. And when I look back over the past, that is much bigger on my psychic landscape than most of the speeches that I've made or the things that I've written. Although there were some beautiful moments in that work as well. But what I'm saying is the inner landscape of what were the important moments of life doesn't necessarily correspond to the mental landscape of what had the biggest impact on the world. So one of the things that I like to share with people is that maybe this inner landscape and this direct sense of importance is actually a reliable guide to life. And that the soul, or the heart, you know, the bones, the gut, the body can identify what is important and what is in the best service to life better than the calculating mind can. And this seems to put heart and mind in conflict, but it doesn't have to be that way, because I believe that there is a story of causality that can unify the heart and the mind. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I could, in this moment, I could elaborate that story and say, here's the story that unifies heart and mind. But before I even do that, I just wanted to say that everybody already knows what I'm saying and what you just said, that these small moments of love, kindness, generosity, compassion are world-changing in some other landscape.
Yeah. And that's something that we are losing in increasing measure in our culture. And when I was thinking of questions I like to ask you, one theme that came up for me was abstraction and the predominance of abstraction in our culture. And we're like, artificial intelligence is dreamt to replace human intelligence, and money money is like the general abstraction that seems to govern our lives. Then I chanced to open up the computer and listen to a conversation you had with David Abram some time ago, and you were talking how even in the field of ecology, the tendency to abstraction, like to make it, to subsume it all under the label of global warming, is a form of like an old formal mind, and that we need to move beyond. Would you say something like how you see the our approach to the earth and evolution and nature?
Yeah. For anything to be treated scientifically, it has to be abstracted, because what makes something scientific is a quantitative treatment. And to convert something into quantities or to describe something by quantities, you are necessarily abstracting things through measurement. You're talking about the weight, the wavelength, the carbon footprint. You're talking about something that you can put a number on. And when you describe two different things in the world through numbers, you make them the same. You abstract those qualities that you can measure and you quantify them. And so when the same set of numbers describes two different things, they become the same thing, at least in your understanding of them, in your vision of them. So you no longer have a personal, unique relationship with any of those things. This power of abstraction allows us to see patterns, to see commonalities. There's nothing wrong with it fundamentally, as long as we recognize its limitations and we don't get lost in the map and forget that the map is not the territory. And because when we do that, then we reduce everything to a set of standard generic quantities. And ultimately, we do that to nature. We do that to human beings. And we forget that something is always lost in that reduction. So even if you want to measure the health of an ecosystem, you can come up with metrics to do that, like the density of relationships or something like that. There are metrics that go way beyond carbon sequestration or any single quantity, but even these more sophisticated metrics are still going to leave something out. And I think as long as we recognize that, then we can use this powerful tool of abstraction in service to life. It's just that we get hypnotized by that power and forget there's anything outside of it.
Well, because it has been so successful, it has built the technology we're using in this moment to talk to each other.
Yes.
And yet, it's like something essential for our life and well-being. It's lost.
Yes. And even artificial intelligence, we'll run up against limits that most people are not really seeing yet, but maybe we're starting to see that, like these new chat AIs are coming out, and at first they seem to be intelligent, like that one Google engineer said it is sentient, we have created sentient intelligence. But now as people play with them and experiment with them more, these bugs and limitations are appearing that I would postulate will not easily go away. They are fundamental to the limitations of artificial intelligence, which is not an embodied intelligence. It's fully an abstract intelligence. And our own intelligence is not a matter of the computational processing of a Boolean network of zeros and ones, neurons that are on or off. That computational model of mind is a projection of our technology onto life, just as the mechanical model of the human being was a projection of the technology of the Industrial Revolution onto biology. And back then people thought, well, man is a machine, biology is mechanical. And now that we have computers, we think, well, mind is a computational process. But it actually isn't. It's not, mind is not reducible to zeros and ones. It is embodied. It's in our bodies. And this has been demonstrated in laboratory experiments where, for example, they take, I think this is Michael Levin's work, they take flatworms. Is it flatworms? Planaria, yeah. And, if you cut up a flatworm, the pieces can regrow an entire worm. So they even have cut off their heads and they grow a new head, right? Why not? I'm missing a head, I grow a new one, right? The funny thing is, though, that the new head has the memories of the old head, because they can teach the flatworms to, I don't know what they teach them to do. They had a signal that alerted them to food is coming here. So they would learn that this signal, maybe some pattern on the floor of their tank or something, that means here's where the food is. So the new flatworm with a new head and a new brain had the memories of the old flatworm, which is just, an example of how memory, which is a pretty fundamental cognitive function, is embodied. Like our entire bodies think, not just our brains. So anyway, you can see how that feeds into AI.
Yeah. I'm reminded of experiments that were done and studied by a friend, a Jungian analyst who was at the Eranos conference. He studied in people who had a heart transplant, some memories and some features of the previous life were now embodied in this new combination.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even when people get a liver transplant or a kidney transplant, they also sometimes take on a little of a new personality. Yeah.
I didn't know. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah.
And imagine what happens when you get a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Oof. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in medicine, there's a tendency to abstraction and its dominance has also some scary overtones, as we've recently experienced, and I think you have deeply analyzed.
Yeah. When medicine becomes scientific and treats people as cases or as generic examples of a class of diseases or body types or patients, then this exclusion of all of the things that don't fit into the measurements by which people are standardized can cause all kinds of harm, because we're treating people, when we treat them scientifically, we're treating them as identical, but functionally identical to a whole class of subjects, but they never are. And that's why a good doctor will not only operate by the algorithmic diagnosis based on a set of tests. He or she will also apply intuition and experience and say, yeah, the tests are saying this, but I have a gut feeling that actually what your problem is something else. And that becomes, as medicine becomes more and more technological and organizational. That's not the word I want. More and more regulated, I guess, then there's less and less room for doctors to make those judgment calls because they have to justify everything. And so that, and also it, when everything is based on data, it makes us vulnerable to the manipulation of that data. When you're immersed in a abstracted reality where you're making all your decisions based on some data set that you accept as the reality, as the territory, and not just a possibly very flawed map, then you are vulnerable to anybody who can manipulate that data. And that's what we saw happen during the COVID era. Like anyone who said, well, I'm scientific, I trust the data. Well, what is the process by which that data is produced? What are the vested interests that validate some data and exclude other data, and that influence the process by which the data is collected? You know, what experiments are done and what experiments are not done? What are published and what are not published? What will advance your career and what will destroy your career? Like, this whole biased process is built into, like, the possibility of that bias is built into the program of abstraction. And you can seek to minimize the bias, but you will always be vulnerable to it when you put data on the altar of truth.
Yeah. It's interesting that now we are very polarized. I mean, there is all this thing of the abstraction, artificial intelligence, and so on. And in the other hand, it is this story about cooperation, going to the countryside, being together, you know, thinking another and more horizontal way of living, not so vertical, and these kind of things. Then I wish that we will be one day, these two, I mean, all this technological and abstract and this practical and day-by-day way of living, I mean, rooted living on Earth, they will be together someday, no? How will be this kind of transition when abstraction, no? How will be that process? Can you imagine about that? How will abstraction will go into the countryside and how the countryside will go into abstraction?
Yeah, I think it's more a matter of recognizing the limitations of it and what the technologies of abstraction, the technologies of control, the technologies of standardization. I mean, these are fundamentally still industrial technologies. The computer it's not a post-industrial technology. It is the culmination of industrial technology. And so the question is, what is the proper role of these technologies in human life? And I think that today the problem is that technology and abstraction in general, including, as you mentioned earlier, money, has taken over areas of life that should remain in the relational, the personal, the land-based, earth-based realm. So we need to reclaim many aspects of human beingness from the realm of the abstract and the technologically mediated things, like even like production of food. When food becomes a standardized industrial commodity, our health and well-being suffer.
Yeah.
And when cooking becomes a standardized technological process and people don't cook anymore, but they get their food all packaged and all ready for them, the metrics say the food is the same number of calories, same number of vitamins, same this, same that. But everybody knows that there is something in the food prepared by a loved one, by your mother, for example, that cannot be captured in any formula or algorithm or standardized process. There's something beyond what we can measure. This is the foundation. We have to accept that we cannot tame the wild completely. We cannot bring everything into a set of fixed categories.
Thanks.
You guys know this is in the Tao Te Ching, on line 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like reclaiming, just give more examples, reclaiming music, reclaiming entertainment, instead of downloading it, like singing together, reclaiming play instead of watching people play on a screen. What about children getting together and playing their own games? There's so much that we need to reclaim right now from consumption, from the economic relations of money.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. You.
A word I've run into when listening to you, Charles, is this word interbeing.
Yeah.
Which has this tone of acute sensitivity to the ungraspable, unmeasurable, uncontrollable nature of life or even existence. Would you say some more about that? About the idea of interbeing.
Yeah. So interbeing is a term that's used in Buddhism a lot. Thich Nhat Hanh, I think, was the one who popularized it. But it occurs very naturally when you're trying to explain existence in a non-Cartesian way, like that, to convey the idea that existence is relationship, that we exist through our relationships. Even on a quantum level, this is the case, that an electron or a proton or some subatomic particle only exists in space and time at a fixed spot when it is in relationship to something else, when it is entangled with something else, when you take a measurement on it. Before you do that, it is in a superposition of states. It is in many places all at once. It, in a sense, doesn't exist at a fixed location until you come into a relationship with it. So interbeing that word tries to tries to express that principle of being. And so to take it to a personal level, who I am, like my true self, is not who I am when I'm alone in a room. And that's the real me. And then I become something not me when I'm in relationship to somebody else. No, who I am is the totality of all of these relationships, which means that when my relationships are severed, when I no longer experience community, when I'm no longer connected to the life around me, when I'm no longer connected to a place and to land, and I don't have intimate relationships anymore, then I become less.
Yeah.
My very being withers. And this is the condition of people in modern societies. They hunger for their lost beingness. They want to become more. And that hunger feeds endless addiction and consumption. But no amount of addictions no amount of alcohol, no amount of drugs, no amount of purchases on Amazon can meet the need to fully be here. And to fully be here means we have to have rich relationships, intimate relationships with humans and other than human beings. So that's what interbeing is. And you had wanted me to relate it to control. Yeah, I mean, when you are fundamentally separate from the world, then your well-being depends on controlling the world. You have to, because these other beings are enemies, competitors, or they're indifferent to you because their well-being is that's their affair. Their being is separate. They're in a separate room from you. So what happens to them need not affect you. You can dominate them and you'll be better off. So you have to be in control of things in the story of separation.